Hi, readers. So we are continuing on our adventures with fairy tales. I hope that you still have some fairy tales left in your Get Epic or your Reading A to Z that I have assigned. There was quite a few of them in there. You also could once in a while, but not too often, you could go onto YouTube and you can search fairy tale read alouds and you could listen to one as well as follow along with the words. But we want to make sure that you are doing most of the reading. So we only want to do that every once in a while, especially since you guys are listening to me read you books. So we're going to talk about something today. It's a big word, it's a new word, but it is something that you have been seeing in every single fairy tale that you have read or that I have been reading to you. It's even in the fairy tales that you are writing. And those are called archetypes. An archetype is a very specific kind of character that we see in fairy tales. We very often have the good guy and the bad guy. We have the sidekick. We have the person that is magical. We have the trickster. We have the sneaky character. Archetypes are a type of character that we see over and over and over again in fairy tales. You also see archetypes in a lot of the movies that we watch, especially movies with superheroes and bad guys. So we're going to take a look at a list of archetypes that we might notice in the books that we are reading. And it's important for us to realize this pattern because when we notice who is the good guy and who is the bad guy, we can use the patterns that that character has shown us in a different fairy tale to help us understand and predict how they're going to act in this new fairy tale that we're reading, right? So this first one that we're going to take a look at is all of the archetypes that we would characterize as like the good characters. Okay, so you might have the little boy or the little girl, a princess or the prince, a king and a queen, a bride and a groom, daughter and a son, the shepherd, the knight, the mermaid, a good witch, a good wizard, an elf, right? Or an animal. Now, these characters are not necessarily always the good guys, right? You can have an evil prince or a bad little boy or a fresh little girl. You can have a bad shepherd because that might be what the author has fractured in their tale. But in a traditional fairy tale, these are typically your characters who are your good characters. Your good witch or your good wizard are going to be the magical ones that usually help out the main character. So when you're reading and you come across one of these characters, they most likely are going to be the good character. But we also have to realize that sometimes the author may have put a twist in their story where this character is actually the bad character. Okay, so these are all different archetypes that we typically see for our good characters, for the person that is in charge of helping to solve the problem that has the magical powers. And then we have our bad characters. Sometimes we have a witch. Sometimes even a wizard can be a bad wizard. There's some kind of beast or dragon. The fox and the wolf all the time. These guys are our bad guys. We might have monsters or trolls or giants, that evil stepmother or stepfather, the wicked queen and the wicked king, the thief, a sorcerer, or a small little man. In a lot of the fairy tales that we read, these are our typical bad guys, our tricksters, our sneaky ones, the ones that are causing the main character a problem. So if we know which characters are typically our good characters and which characters are typically our bad characters, it makes it easy for us to follow the story. It makes it easier for us to predict what the character is going to do because we've seen them in many of the other books that we've read. So I have a story that I want to share with you today. It's a video, but I'm going to be reading it to you. I actually forgot the book at school, but it's one of the books that we use for fairy tales, and it's one of my favorite books. It is a spin of Little Red Riding Hood, but it's called Pretty Salma, and it's a story that takes place in Africa. And as we read it, we're going to pay attention to who are the archetypes in that story? Where is our good guy and our bad guy? Where are the people who help our main character? And when we do that, it will help us better understand, right? The flow of the story and what's going on in the story. All right. So here we go with this. So it's Pretty Salma, a Little Red Riding Hood story from Africa by Nikki Daly. Salma lived with her granny and grandfather on the quiet side of town. One day her granny said, oh, let's go back a little bit. It moved a little quickly for us. Apologize for that. Salma lived with her granny and grandfather on the quiet side of town. One day her granny said, Salma, pretty Salma, please go to the market for your old granny who loves you so. Salma put on her blue scarf and her stripy tama. We just read that page. Her pretty white beads and her yellow sandals. She tucked Granny's shopping list in her tama, lifted Granny's big straw basket onto her head, and kissed Granny goodbye. Straight there and back again, said Granny, and don't talk to strangers, you hear? Okay, I promise, said Salma. Off went Salma, flip flop, in her yellow sandals. As she walked, she sang her favorite song. Oh, Salma, pretty Salma, come kiss Granny, your darling old Granny who loves you so. At the market, she bought a giant watermelon, a speckled rooster, an ice cold pink drink, and a bunch of candy striped straws. The sun was growing hot, and the basket felt very heavy, so Selma decided to take a shortcut home through the wild side of town. Along the way, she sang her favorite song. Oh, Salma, pretty Salma, dear old granny who loves you so. Are you pretty, Salma? Asked the stranger. It was Mr. Dog. He had been listening to her song. Yes, said Salma. Are you going to Granny's? Asked Mr. Dog. Yes, said Salma. Well, your basket's much too heavy for such a pretty little head, said Mr. Dog. Allow me to carry it for you. Salma did feel a bit dizzy from the heat, so she agreed to let Mr. Dog carry her basket. All right, so real quick, let's think about those archetypes. We have so far, our little girl who seems to be the good character who's just going on a run for her granny to get the things that she needs. And we have a dog who is very similar to a wolf or a coyote or a fox. And he's asking to carry the basket for her. So we don't really know who he is yet, but we can probably, from all of the other stories we've read, think that he is the archetype of the bad guy, that he is after something else other than just trying to be helpful. And we even see the guy in the background, the look on his face. He's not too sure about it either. After a while, Mr. Dog asked, What are you wearing on your feet? Sandals, replied Pretty Sama. They must be making your little feet tired, he said. Why don't I wear them for you? Hmm. On they went, floppity flip, flippity flop. After a while, Mr. Dog asked, "What's the wrap you're wearing?" "My Tama," replied Selma. "I bet you'd feel cooler without it. I'd be happy to wear it for you." Most bad guys are very sneaky and quite the trickster, and Mr. Dog is showing to be exactly that. No sooner had Mr. Dog wrapped Selma's palm around himself than he asked for her scarf and pretty beads. "How do I look?" asked Mr. Dog, striking a pose. Mr. Dog strutted along the road in high style. Selma began to miss her things, but she asked for them back. Mr. Dog only said, "Some music will help us beat the heat. Won't you teach me a song?" So Selma tried to teach him her favorite song. "Oh, Selma, pretty Selma, come kiss Granny, your darling old Granny who loves you so." And a lot of times, our good character often gets panicked when that bad character is doing something to them. They start to figure out that something isn't quite right. But Mr. Dog was hopeless at singing. All he could do was go, "Woof, woof, woof." "I need a lot more practice," said Mr. Dog. "And until I learn to sing, you won't get your things back." So we can see here he's trying to be just like pretty Selma. Selma begged, Selma pleaded, Mr. Dog, please give me back my things." Mr. Dog growled, "Shh, you will never ever get your things back. Now run away, little girl, before I bite you in two." So there is our bad guy. We knew it was coming. Um, And until she found her grandfather dressed in his Anansi costume telling stories. When grandfather heard Selma's story, he said, "That's a very exciting story, Selma, but it doesn't sound like a happy ending. How can we save Granny?" So now we have the character, another good character that comes and saves the day, right? Or is offering to try and help save the day. So this would be like our good witch or our good wizard, or sometimes it's another family member. It's somebody who helps the character that's in trouble. It is an archetype that we see in many of the fairy tales that we read. "I know," said Sama. "We'll scare Mr. Dog." "Exactly how will we scare Mr. Dog?" asked Grandpa. "Like this," said Sama, putting on the mask of Kaka the Boogeyman. Selma picked up Anansi's arampan and beat it loudly. "Go Emma, go Emma." Grandfather picked up his rattles and gave them a fierce shake. "Shuka, shuka." Little Abu Bakr, who loved a good scare, joined in with the clapping sticks. "Attack, attack." "Let's go," cried Salma. Meanwhile, when Granny saw Mr. Dog flip-flopping up the path, she thought it was her pretty Salma. "Salma, pretty Salma, come give your Granny who loves you a kiss," cried Granny. But Mr. Dog leapt up and gave her a sloppy kiss. "Oh, my Salma," said Granny, "what a wet nose you have." And then we have Granny here, who's also that archetype. Right? Sometimes there's a character that is in trouble. Granny took the heavy basket from Mr. Dog and said, "Selma, pretty Selma, you look hungry. Let's eat." Mr. Dog started to chase the speckled rooster round and round. "Oh my, Selma," said Granny, "what an appetite you have." Then Granny said, "Selma, pretty Selma, it's time for your bath. Into the bath let Mr. Dog." "Oh, my Selma," said Granny, "what hairy ears you have. Are you sure you are my pretty Selma?" "Oh, yes, yes, yes," cried Mr. Dog, jumping into Granny's lap and wagging his tail. Now Granny was really worried. Did her pretty Selma have a tail? Perhaps this wasn't her pretty Selma. Hmm. He thinks he's getting away with it, as most bad guys do, but Granny's starting to realize that this isn't quite her pretty Selma. Realizing it more and more now that dog doesn't have on any of Salma's things. Well, there was only one way to find out. Let's sing our favorite song, said Granny, and she started to sing. Oh, Salma, pretty Salma, come kiss Granny, your darling old Granny who loves you so. Woof, 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 barked Mr. Dog, and Granny knew she had been tricked. Woo, 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 woo. She reached for her broom. Out! Get out! But Mr. Dog liked being pretty Selma far too much to leave Granny's house. So instead, he growled and snapped at her. Granny was afraid Mr. Dog would bite her in two, so she jumped into her cooking pot. Mr. Dog pushed the lid down. Nice, he thought. Granny soup. Granny cried, help! 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 Goema, goema, shuka, shuka, katak, attack. Just then the door burst open. When Mr. Dog saw Kakamatobi, the boogeyman, and his gang, he got a terrible fright. So there's all of our good characters to the rescue. That bad dog slipped and tripped over his miserable tail right out of the house. Selma took off her mask and helped Granny climb out of the pot. The next day, Granny sent Selma to market to buy new clothes. Selma went straight there and back, and she never talked to strangers again. All right, so we go back to our archetype page, right? So we had our little girl, all right, and then we had the people that helped her. So we didn't have a king or a queen. We didn't have a good witch or a good wizard, right? But we had her grandfather. We had the other little boy. And they, with Salma, helped save her granny, right? And then we have our bad guy, our evil character, right? It says an animal of choice happened to be a dog, but a dog is very similar to the fox and the wolf and the coyote. So this story, even a story from Africa, which was based on the true Little Red Riding Hood, has the archetypes that we find in all fairy tales. So when you are reading today and you're reading your fairy tale, I want for you to pay attention to who the archetypes are. Where is your good character? Where is your bad character? Where is the trickster? Where is the person that is helping solve the main character's problem? Pay attention to those good guys and those bad guys and notice that they act very similar in every single fairy tale that you read. And that will help you make predictions about how they're going to act next or what they're going to do next in the book. All right, guys, happy reading.